Turner, co-chair of the Terry Third Thursday Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Terry Executive Education Center for our Third Thursday. Thank you for being here this morning. This is our monthly breakfast event to provide a networking opportunity here in Atlanta for alumni and students. It takes a lot to organize Terry Third Thursday, so I'd like to thank my co-chair Jamie Hockin, the members of the Terry Third Thursday Committee, and our sponsors, our corporate sponsor Synovus, and our media sponsor, Public Broadcasting of Atlanta. June is the last Terry Third Thursday program of our semester. The next one is, this semester is June 16th at 7 a.m. and we'll have Reddy Curry, who some of you probably heard of before. He's a former football player at Georgia, and he's an author and keynote speaker and CEO of Game Changer Coaching. So we're looking forward to that in June. Now I'd like to ask Alumni Board Member Joe Crump to come up. Thanks, Joe.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How we doing? We got any Bulldogs in the house here? You know, it's been a long time, and I think it's appropriate that we celebrate one more time. So I was at a wedding recently, and I love this parting gift. So as we're leaving, they're giving out national championship hats. So let's give it up one more. How about them dogs? I told my wife I was going to do that. She was like, all right, whatever. So I am thrilled to be a member of this committee and proud to be supporting Brad and Jamie. They've done a great job putting our speakers together this year. And I'm really excited to introduce you to Ron Domanico. Ron is the CFO of Brinks, as you know. You're going to hear a fascinating story of his, he called it the Confessions of a Serial CFO. And I think it's amazing. We met about 12 years ago. He's been a great client and a great friend. But I didn't realize that he has been the CFO of, do you have a minute? Caristar, Nabisco, Kraft, HL Services, Recall Holdings, Home Depot Supply, and Brinks for the last 6 years. I mean, that is amazing. Think about all the decisions, all the strategy. I don't know if I can divulge this, but during COVID, we only did 20 M&A transactions. I mean, this guy is a machine. He works harder than anybody I know. He travels the world. Brinks is in over 100 countries. 6,000 employees, 12,000 fleet. I may have left off 4 billion. Are you 4 billion in revenue? Almost 5. It's an iconic company. I think it started in 1859. If we're lucky enough, he may share a bit about their 2.0 strategy. But you all recognize Brinks from the trucks, right?
Yes.
There's a whole lot more to this company. But there's a whole lot more to Ron and his wife Melody, who Claire and I have had the privilege to meet. They raised, I guess, 2 boys and a daughter?
2 and 2.
2 and 2. And what, 4 or 5 grandkids?
6 now.
My bad. It's hard to keep up.
Pandemic.
Yeah. The other thing that you wouldn't know about Ron and Melody is that they have dedicated over 3 decades to serving the high school wrestling community. In fact, they've opened their houses for 30 years to state wrestling champions, some from rural and underprivileged communities. In fact, I think you've got some coming up in the next weekend or so. Another fun fact about Ron is, I'm going to get this wrong, but you are the state champion referee. I think he may describe it better, but every year they have the wrestling championship in Georgia down in Macon. In the final match, he's been the referee the last many years. So he's a great business leader. I hate to say it, he's brilliant. He's fun. You work your butt off 15, 16, 17 hours every day, then you go out to dinner. He's fun to have a burger and a beer with. He's got a good sense of humor. He's a great mentor. I'm proud to call him my friend, and if you would join me in welcoming our speaker, Ron Domanico.
works, and even if it doesn't, I don't think I need it. Well, Joe asked if I wanted to speak to this group, and I said I'd love to. It's a lot of fun. And then the subject, what are you going to talk about? I said, well, I could talk about a lot of things. I could talk about Brinks, but I do that every day. I was in New York last week at a non-deal roadshow talking to investors, and the company's doing great. It's doing better than it's ever had. We had a record last year. We had a record first quarter, and nobody notices. They think cash was dying and COVID killed it, and just the opposite is true, but who has more than $100 on them right now in cash? Raise your hand. See, we're part of the problem. Okay, thanks, Hollis. No, unfortunately, people who live at the margin of society during times like this lose access to debit and credit and have to rely on cash, and because of that, they rely on Brinks. We're the largest global cash management company by far. We're more than 2 times bigger than our competitors. Nevertheless, we are developing new services and systems. We're evolving with the payment world, and we are now trying to make cash as easy for retailers to accept as debit and credit, and more on that later, but that's not why I'm here. I went through my career and picked several things that were eye-openers to me. Starting at my first job at Kraft Foods in Chicago, I was the manager of finance for research and development. So I had an MBA in finance, and I walked into an organization where I was the least educated person in the entire group. And I would go sit in with these PhDs who were inventing new food products and listen to their inventions, and right after the meeting I would kill their project. And I did that in about 90% of the meetings, and so they awarded me a doctorate. They call me Dr. Death, because I had to evaluate the economic viability of their project, not the scientific viability of their project. We had a team that was working for 5 years to convert whey, the byproduct from making cheese, and Kraft made a lot of that, into something the world could use. So they were converting whey into vitamin C. They'd been working on it for 5 years. And so I said, well, that's cool. And I started as an undergraduate in pre-med. So I understood the chemistry and the biology and mutating enzymes and all that stuff to eat whey and poop out. Vitamin C is the layman explanation. And they were getting quite a way along. And I said, you guys are about a year away from perfecting this. So how much vitamin C can we make with just the whey Kraft produces? I said, well, I don't know. I said, and what would it cost for a bottle of vitamin C if you were successful? I don't know. So they came back, it took them a couple days, and they said, well, we could make, just with our own whey, enough vitamin C to have 100 bottles for every person on the planet every year. I said, and the cost would be about $20 a bottle, and you can get in the store for like $2. And I said, you didn't ask this question 5 years ago when you started? I mean, what would happen if you succeeded? You would fail. And so I killed that one too, and that made headlines in Kraft. My big breakthrough, however, came talking all the scientists, and I said, what do you guys do here? And they said, well, we invent stuff, and then we give it over to marketing to see if they can sell it. And I said, well, why don't you go to marketing and see what they can sell and see if you can make it? They never thought about that. I mean, I say, it took like the lowest educated person in the room to ask a pretty basic question, just to flip a dynamic on its head, and it changed everything. So marketing, said, why don't you come up with a microwavable cheese that you could pour right on nachos? And it's like, it was already Cheese Whiz. You just open the lid and put it in the microwave, and it tripled the sales of Cheese Whiz in a year. It's like, again, that was the first thing I wanted to share. My career progressed from R&D. I went to the venture group. We did acquisitions, acquired Lender's Bagels and Celestial Seasonings Tea, All American Gourmet, and maybe a dozen other companies. And then I moved to corporate, where I learned all the corporate stuff. And while I was there, got to meet all the bigwigs, the board and everything. And right after that, I moved to international, and that's when Philip Morris put a bid in for Kraft. And my job was to come up with the defense plan so they wouldn't buy Kraft. And my job was really to squeeze another $10 a share out of them so we'd get the higher premiums. And so we were successful in doing that. And as a reward, they moved me over to the International Foods Group when we were combining Kraft and General Foods. See, Philip Morris made a mistake when it bought Kraft. When it bought General Foods, it made all the General Foods executives so rich, they retired. So if you acquire a company, you can give the management team go to the beach money, but don't give them stay at the beach money. Okay? And what happened is Philip Morris now owned this General Foods company with no food leadership. And food is different than tobacco. I mean, you don't eat, a cheese stick, 25 times a day and don't care how much it costs, right? So they really needed Kraft for the management team. So they brought me to New York to consolidate Kraft International and General Foods International. There's 160 companies in over 60 countries. And I did that day and night when my daughter Michelle was 3 years old. She would come visit me in the office with her little brother, her mom. They would bring a pizza, a new suit, and a new shirt. I would shower in the fitness center, sleep on my couch 3 hours, and do it again. But as a reward, they said, you can go be CFO for any Kraft business around the world. Where do you want to go? So I said, oh, okay, well, let's go to Scandinavia. Scandinavia had one product, coffee. Okay, of all the products in the world that Kraft had, it only had one product. It was only in Sweden and Denmark. So okay, I'll go over there. But I'm going over there to build the business. It was about $250 million in revenue. When I left, it was 10 times larger, but through a series of acquisitions, internal growth. And I was audacious in trying to acquire the 5th largest company in Norway. It was called Freya. It was the largest chocolate company. It was right after I bought the largest chocolate company in Sweden, which was Marabou, and none of you guys know this, but good chocolate, if you ever want to find it in a specialty store. It's made very differently than we make chocolate in the United States. It's creamier, it's softer. And so I was in the office one night at 10 o'clock to do the Norwegian deal, and I get this phone call. And I said, are you the CFO? I said, yes. I said, are you buying Norwegian kroner? I said, yes, I'm buying Norwegian kroner. So, well, how many are you buying? I said, 10 billion. And he said, we don't have 10 billion Norwegian kroner. I said, who am I talking to? I said, I'm the treasurer of the country of Norway. I said, what do you mean you don't have 10? He said, you have been moving the international exchange rate for the kroner these last few weeks. And you need to stop buying the kroner on the open market. So I struck a deal with the treasurer of Norway so that we could buy it directly from the treasury. We ended up saving, several $1 million, tens of millions of dollars doing it. But it was just the lack of realization that us ugly Americans have that we are big and we go do things and we don't really understand the impact on other companies and other cultures. So that was fun. I expanded into Norway, Finland, Iceland. So Kraft General Foods Scandinavia became Kraft's most profitable business anywhere in the world. It had grown to about as big as it could. We had added all these different product categories, spices, potato chips, hard candy, soft candy, chocolate, and it was a fun experience. And finally Nabisco called and they said, hey, we'd like you to be CFO for everything outside the United States. And so I thought about it for a while. We'd been in Scandinavia for a 2-year assignment that took 7 years. Another lesson, don't ever believe what the company tells you. When you take a move, assume you're going to be on your own and they're going to forget about you. Okay? It doesn't matter how good you do, they're going to forget about you. It was a great experience. We went to Sweden with 2 children. We came home with 4. The nights are long in the winter, and the television was horrible. So I went to Nabisco, and Nabisco International was doing fine. It was the spinoff of KKR. The deal was done at Galleria by Ross Johnson. And when this huge LBO took place, the biggest of its time, if you haven't read Barbarians at the Gate or seen the movie, you should do that. They asked me to come in, and I was doing acquisitions all over the world, reconstructing Nabisco International, but at the same time, the U.S. business for Nabisco was not doing so well. And so the CEO at the time said, well, everybody knows that half of all advertising is wasted, so let's cut half of the advertising, okay? And they did that, and they made their target, and then the next year, for some reason, sales went down, and he decided to cut advertising in half again, and the company surprisingly ended up in this death spiral, and nobody could figure out why. But the bottom line is, if you don't know which half of the advertising is wasted, you better either figure that out or stop at some point in time so you don't kill the top line. My next story was, in my spare time, since I wasn't busy enough being CFO of everything outside the US, I ended up firing the CEO of Nabisco Asia, because when I was reviewing his expense report on a trip, he and his head of human resources only submitted a bill for one hotel room. And so I confronted him about it, and he said, yeah, it's consensual. I said, it doesn't matter if it's consensual, it's against our policies, and you're fired. And he was probably one of our best leaders other than that, but one mistake is all it takes. So I fired him, and then the CEO of Nabisco looked at me and said, go run Nabisco Asia. It's like, what? And he said, you just fired our leader in Asia, we need it. And this was in the middle of the Asian financial crisis. It was a lot of fun. I made more money hedging the Philippine currency than I did actually making and selling cookies or anything else over there. It was an interesting experience, but I was also head of introducing products in China. And they said, what's your biggest product? I said, Oreo. I said, you can't sell Oreos in China. I said, why not? I said, well, Chinese don't eat sweet food, and black is the color of death. You can't have black food, and you can't have sweet food. It just won't sell. And so I talked to R&D, and I said, well, could you have like a lighter brown cookie, and could you take half the sugar out of the filling? And they thought that was a great idea, and I said, no, that's not an Oreo. It's like, so I said, heck, we're just gonna release Oreos in China and see what happens. And within a year, it was the largest selling biscuit in the entire country, and it was because the Chinese people really didn't care if it was a dessert of death. They wanted something American. It was a status symbol. The unfortunate problem was they carried it around in the wrapper and they never ate it. So we sold one to every person in the country, which was still a big deal. But after a while, they said, you actually have to eat these things. And I don't like the taste; it's too sweet. I said, it's okay. But the next one I want to talk about. After Nabisco was the first time I retired, I was 40 years old, and I'd averaged 140 international flights a year for 12 years, and we had 4 children. On most days I could match the names and faces, but not every day. So I said, that's ridiculous. So I had the opportunity to stay home, and it was going great, I thought, but I got bored out of my mind. And finally the kids came to me about a year into it, and they said, we love you, Dad, but you're now meaner than Mom, and you need to go back to work. I said, you're the ringleader. That's my daughter, Michelle. And I said, I love you guys too, but I'm going nuts. I am going back to work. And so I looked around, had a lot of opportunities, and came down here to Atlanta, just down the street, the Atlanta Financial Center, joined a company called AHL Services. And their main business at the time was aviation security. So their business model was you hire kids away from McDonald's at minimum wage, and you try to teach them how to keep bombs and weapons off of airplanes, and your customers are all on the verge of bankruptcy. Okay, that was the business model. And I said, really? He's like, so I went to the founder, Frank Gargabright, great guy, and I said, Frank, your child is ugly. You never want to tell a parent that their kid is ugly, but when their kid is ugly, just the best thing you could do is, especially as a finance guy, is you have to tell the truth. And I said, I think we should sell the cornerstone of your company. And I have a bunch of other stories about that. Some are humorous, some are just sick, but you'd enjoy them. And 9 months before 9/11, I sold the AHL security, and I sold it for $170 million. And on 9/12, it was worth zero. It was probably worth less than zero. And so it was either brilliant or really lucky. My wife did get phone calls from newspapers asking her, how did your husband know to sell the business before 9/11 and stuff like that. I said, no, nothing like that. It was just a bad business model. The next thing I wanted to talk about is after AHL Services, I joined a company called Caraustar. It's the world's largest maker of recycled paperboard. And recycling's big today, it was big back then. And we would go to customers and say, look, the performance of the recycled paperboard, and this is like cereal boxes and things like that. It's also the outside liner of wallboard, and if you don't know what paperboard is, it's thicker cardboard. And we said, look, we can perform just as good as the virgin material. We're not cutting down trees, we're not polluting the environment. And they said, yeah, we'll buy it, but we're not paying a penny more for it. I said, well, why not? It's green, it's great. And they go, yeah, we really like that, but we're not paying for it. And so with all the sustainability and ESG talk today, we're still facing that. Is that everybody wants it, but very few people want to pay for it. Hopefully the world is moving more in that direction, but we'll see. Also, the company was in trouble when I joined, turned it around, refinanced, made it profitable, divested some businesses. Was free cash flow positive, good leverage. 92% of the debt came due in beginning of 2009. And so at the end of 2008 was the financial crisis. And so I went out to refinance the debt, and nobody was lending anything. I mean, I went to the mob, and I didn't go to the mob, but even they weren't lending money. It felt like it. So I went to private equity, okay, so it was the mob. But, so it shows you that even if a company is profitable, growing, free cash flow positive, timing is important. And sometimes you can plan things, but the message there is, do it earlier, pay a little bit of a premium, just get the important things done so you don't end up in an unfortunate situation. I then became the CFO at HD Supply, and I will check my clock to see how I'm doing. And HD Supply was a group of about 140 companies acquired by the Home Depot over a series of 4 years. They had just made so much money they didn't know what to do with it. They started acquiring anything that sort of looked like construction, and I'm not bad-mouthing anybody, but and then that strategy didn't work. They fired the CEO, and then they spun off the company. Okay, and so I came into this business that was really 140 companies, and we consolidated to 4 major businesses, 4 minor businesses, sold off some things, and on the second day I walked in, and the CEO said, okay, what should we focus on? I go, what do you mean? What should we focus on? He said, look, we got 140 companies here, we're in all these different businesses, and I said, no. I said, I'm glad you think I'm that smart on my second day in the business. I said, but let me tell you what to do. I said, I looked on Wall Street at the sell-side analyst who covered wholesale distribution, industrial distribution, and I said, who are the best rated ones? And I got the 5 best rated sell-side analysts. And I called them up and I said, look, we're a private company, we're thinking about going public one day. I said, how do you evaluate whether to put a buy, hold, or sell on a stock? What do you do? So we have these very sophisticated models. I said, okay, fine. What are the 4 most important variables in your model that drive the value recommendation? I go, can we get back to you? No, I said, you can't tell me no. So they got back to me within a week. One analyst gave me 80 pages of analysis. The shortest one I got was 20 pages. A lot of analytical geeks, but when you took the variables together, so we had 5 analysts, 4 variables, 20 possibilities, there was only 5 things that came out. And they said, look, if you focus on organic growth rate, operating efficiency, profit pull-through, earns and turns, okay, so your margin times your inventory turnover and your return on invested capital. Those are the 5 things that make a difference in this business. And said, okay, well, we're going to focus on those. And for the next 2 years we did. We built our incentive program around them. And then even though we were still 8 times levered, the highest levered IPO in Wall Street history, we had an analyst day where we said, we're going to bring this stock public. And they said, oh, you guys are nuts. Nobody's ever had an IPO with an 8 times levered company. And we said, well, let me tell you what. Out of organic growth, operating efficiency, profit pull-through, earns and turns, and ROIC, out of the 20 peer companies, we were number 1 in 3 of those and number 2 in the other 2. They go, wow, okay. So every single analyst there were 17, said, we will recommend a buy on your IPO, just based on this performance and the potential you have. And so it was successful. In June of 2013, we took the company public. And my world changed, because instead of consolidating, building a company, I was now the guy that had to talk to Wall Street 16 hours a day, explaining what's going on, and I say, that's not why I came here. So I retired again and started trading, putting call options myself. I was doing really well. And I got a call from a company called Recall. They're based in Norcross. They're actually based in Sydney, Australia. It's another story. They said, hey, do you want to be CFO? I said, no, I don't. Been there, done that. I have the t-shirt. And they called back, a couple weeks later, and they said, come on, at least talk to us. I said, no, I don't want to be CFO. You're not going to find a good CFO. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, after your first call, I looked up the company, I did some diligence, and said, you're too small. I said, you're not going to be around in a year. No good CFO is going to walk into a situation and then have to find another job. You're going to get acquired, or you need to make some serious acquisitions. And they said, huh. Well, they called back a week later and they said, would you at least have lunch with the CEO? And so I did. I met Doug Pertz. He's the CEO at Brinks now. That's another part of the story. And I said, look, okay, I don't want to be a full-time CFO again, but I'll consult for you. And so in a month, I put together a couple of big acquisitions that would double the size of the company, had the financing lined up. And we were down in Sydney at a board meeting, Australia, and in the lobby we bumped into the CEO of Iron Mountain. They were number 1 at the world at paper file storage. Recall was number 2. I was introduced and basically said, look, you should really buy us. And so the 2 CEOs went upstairs, and on the back of a napkin, same old story, they drew out the terms of the deal. And that was after my 2nd month in the company. So when they came back down, they said, yeah, I think this is going to make sense. I said, okay, now you can hire me. You can give me a bonus potential, you can give me a lot of equity, and I'll get this deal done. And so we had to clear antitrust on 3 continents. It took about 10 months, but we got it done in May of 2016. We sold the business, and it was good for everybody. That's when Doug knew that his time was limited at Recall, and he was getting recruited, headhunted. And Brinks had an activist shareholder and said, come work for us. And long story short, Doug took the job, and then he called me up and said, hey, come be my CFO. I said, no, I'm not doing this again. And he said, okay. And he called back again, and he said, well, come on. I said, no. He said, well, what would it take? And I told him something ridiculous, and he said, that's ridiculous. I said, I know, I don't want to do this. So he called back a half hour later and said, okay. I said, oh, jeez. So lesson there, be careful what you ask for. You might get it, and then you're in a really tough ethical situation. So I went to Brinks, and the first thing I did is I walked to the U.S. headquarters down in Dallas, and they have the conference room called the War Room, and walk in there, and all these papers around the wall. I said, what is this? I said, a bunch of A3s. Those of you who are lean people, know what an A3 is. And they said, well, these are our priorities. And I said, how many are up there? I said, about 50. He said, you can't have 50 priorities. If you have 50 priorities, you have no priorities. I mean, imagine, Georgia terms, you have 50 footballs, and you put them on the field, and you move each one a yard, a minute. Say, at the end of the game, you're gonna have no touchdowns. I said, that's exactly what Brinks was doing. I said, you really need to focus. So we got them to focus on 4 things. Stock tripled in 3 years, the business turned around. Along the way, we said, look, this industry needs to be consolidated. We had 4 competitors in the United States, and the 2 that were the smallest, neither one of them was for sale. So what we did is, on the same day, I went and put an offer in for both of them. And one of them, they're both family owned. And what I said was, we want to buy your company, we want to buy it now. And they said, we don't want to sell it now, I'm not ready. I said, well, here's the deal. I said, I put in an offer for your competitor as well. And the Federal Trade Commission is going to allow only one deal forever. They will never allow the second deal. So if you ever want to sell your company, you need to do it now, and you need to do it with us. Because if you don't, the other guy will. And it was a game of chicken. It worked. We ended up buying Dunbar, great acquisition. But it was a way to buy something that wasn't for sale, just by, understanding the field and leveraging that. I got tons of stories, but I only have 3.5 minutes. So throughout my career, I've probably done 100 acquisitions. The success rate of acquisitions, I think, is about 30%. Mine is probably 98%. And why is that? It's not because I'm really smart or I'm a really brutal negotiator. It's because what I do in every single deal is I figure out what are the few assumptions that drive the value to me for this business. Is it the top line synergy? Is it the cost synergies? Is it growth in revenue? Is it expansion of marketplace? I mean, what is it? And then when I identify the top assumptions, I figure out who's the owner of that assumption. Is it the head of operations? Is it the head of sales? I bring them in and say, look, I'm working on a confidential deal and thinking about acquiring X. I said, oh, that's great. We would love to own X. I said, okay, yeah, I knew you would. I said, okay, if we were to buy X and you were to be able to consolidate the markets and leverage the portfolio, how much could you increase sales? 1 + 1 has got to equal more than 2. What could you do? Oh, I could increase sales 22%. I said, okay. I said, a year from now, if I come to you and sales are only up 21%, you're fired. Okay? How much do you think you can increase sales by combining these numbers? Oh, maybe 16%. I said, okay, so I put 16% in the model. I do the same with the operations guy. Okay, if we can combine their factories with our factories, how much could you save? Could you get the average cost down to? And he goes, oh, I can reduce cost by like 11%. I said, okay, if I come to you in a year and costs are down 10%, you're fired. How much can you reduce costs? And he goes, 8%. I said, okay. And so I put a model together based on the assumptions of each of the owners of the key variables, and it comes up with how much can I afford to pay, okay? And I have that price, and I go in and negotiate. When the price gets $1 above that, I say thank you very much, and I walk away. So I walked away from a lot more deals than I've done, but that's how I've been successful. Is you never fall in love with the deal, and you have the owners of the key assumptions all holding hands going into it together. And then when you do succeed, then it's all about the execution. But a lot of people try to figure out how to be successful in M&A. The first thing is don't fall in love with anything, and the other thing is figure out what the key assumptions are and have the owners of those assumptions on your team. That is the end of the time I was given. I would like to open it up for questions, comments.
And remember, if you'd like to ask a question, please signal for a microphone. And we're recording this for the college's webcast.
So football's been referenced a couple times, right? But I've got a couple boys who are starting to get interested in wrestling. So touch on a little bit life lessons, leadership lessons that you can share as it relates to what wrestling has taught you in life.
Happy to do that. So I was a mediocre wrestler. In fact, it's probably an insult to truly mediocre wrestlers to say I was mediocre. But what it did was it taught me that hard work, perseverance, discipline. If you pursue those, you can be successful even if you're not blessed with great natural talent. That's not true in many other sports. Football size matters, basketball size matters, speed matters, all those things. In wrestling, it's not strength, it's not your athletic build, it's technique, it's discipline. The weight management piece is another part of it. When you're out there, it's just you and the opponent. You don't have anybody else to rely on and nobody else to blame. Teaches you to listen to a coach. And so, it's really helped. The biggest deal Brinks did, we closed on February 26th of 2020, a week before the official start of the pandemic. And the negotiation was 57 hours, and I stayed awake the whole time. And I think that's how we won. I just outwore them. And, I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but, after you wrestled, everything else in life is easy. You just stay up another 10 minutes, another 10 minutes, another 10 minutes. And I slept well eventually, but no, it's been something that, I don't care what it is. We can push through it as long as you hang on to your integrity, your priorities. It's something that's really done a lot for me personally, for our family. There's no fame in it, there's no money in it. It's a truly thankless sport, but I think what you get out of it is probably the most valuable thing, and that's why our family still supports it as heavily as we do.
Thank you so much for that. That was really inspiring. And I would just be interested to know, what was it in your life that happened in your past that really made you push the needle within yourself? Because everything you've accomplished it's pretty phenomenal, but it's not, people aren't necessarily born like it. There's something that happens, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, when I was 19, I got hit by a car as a pedestrian and was supposed to die. I was in amazing shape. I had a 52-inch chest and a 28-inch waist, and I was benching 450. And it was intentional. It was a hit and run. All sorts of injuries. They were supposed to take my leg. But the biggest thing was my heart was seriously bruised, and they said, "Look, you're probably not going to make it." And because of that, time has become the ultimate resource, and you really need to make the most of every day, of every minute, and that was probably the event. I don't talk about it much. But it did change me. A lot of people think money is the ultimate resource. On Marlboro Friday, probably before all your time, you should look it up. I'd lost our entire wealth. $750,000 in one day, and that was bad. But I made that all back and a lot more. So money's not the ultimate resource. Time, the time you're investing this morning, you're never going to get that back. So use it well. Set your priorities. Make sure that you own your priorities. I will tell you, if you do not own your own calendar, there are a lot of other folks who will. Your boss will want to own your calendar. Your body will want to own your calendar. Your church will want to own your calendar. Your family will want to own your calendar. And all of those things are amazingly good things. But you need to set your priorities, and by managing your time is really how you demonstrate your priorities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So one of the key things that I heard from your stories is that all organizations have challenges. What is your secret sauce to coming up with a great strategy that's going to improve all that?
The secret sauce is listening. Okay, I've had a lot of great experience in my life, and I think I can apply that to different situations, but the first thing you need to do in any situation is be an active listener, to ask a lot of questions. The worst thing you can do is solve the wrong problem. So I would say, without a doubt, you know, we walked into Brinks from the outside thinking, oh, this company's done nothing for 5 years, we need to fire a whole bunch of people, we need to bring in some rock stars, we need to do this, and you know, I walked in there and it's like, wow, people are really good. They just need a strategy and they need some leadership. My first day at Brinks, there was a board meeting and the activist shareholder came up to me and they said, look, Brinks has a global headquarters in Richmond, Virginia, and a US headquarters in Dallas. Shut down the Richmond office, moving to Dallas. I said, look, I've been here 4 hours. I say, give me 24 hours and I'll let you know. So I went and I met the team, I talked to them, I learned their experience, and I went back to the lead investor and I said, well, here's the deal. You hired me to do two things. You hired me to do really smart stuff, and you hired me not to do really stupid stuff. Shutting down this office is really stupid. Let me tell you why. I said, we have all the institutional knowledge for the corporation here. Less than half of the people will move. The people that don't move, to replace them in Dallas, you're gonna have to pay 30, 40% more. It's a bad decision economically, it's an even worse decision for the institutional knowledge of the company. So no, I'm not gonna do that. He goes, okay. But you know, he just wanted that type of feedback. And so, you know, basically, you are really paid to do only two things. You're paid to do really smart stuff and not to do really stupid stuff. So to make sure you do both those things correctly, you just need to listen and understand the situation. And it's always all about people. That's beginning, middle, and end. I mean, you know, Coca-Cola almost destroyed an iconic brand by making a bad marketing decision when New Coke came out. Again, you're all probably too young. So, I mean, a brand is a great asset, but poor decisions and poor people can ruin a brand. People are everything in life, but also in business. And so you need to listen to them, understand them, recruit them, retain them, develop them. So it's all about people.
Thank you for that.
I have a very naive question.
No such thing.
How can I get to be where you are at from where I'm at? What do I need to do?
Start wrestling.
Besides that.
What you need to do is something we call constructive conflict. I encourage all my people to disagree with me constructively. Because if everybody agrees with you, they're not adding any value. I can come up with a decision on my own, and if you don't bring any different viewpoint, diversity of thought, diversity of experience, you're really not adding any value. And so what has helped me through my career is always speaking my mind, again, based on analysis and experience, in a lot of situations where it wasn't popular, sometimes when it wasn't welcome. But as a manager and a leader, I welcome constructive conflict, because otherwise you're really not adding any value. So I would encourage you to do your homework and to speak your mind, and in a constructive way, of course. And that worked well for me.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of the stories today. You made some big decisions in your career. My question is, have you ever struggled with disconnecting your emotions to a business decision? Whether it was a merger, an acquisition, keeping a team, fire an employee?
I always put the people first. And so I've had to fire a lot of people in my career, and my wife just gives me crap for this all the time. She says, you can fire people and they'll thank you for it. And it's true. If somebody is not in the right position, the stress on themselves, their family, it's eating them up whether they admit it or not. And if they know you really care for them and that you are more concerned about them getting into a position that is going to be a better fit, I mean, the most recent case, I fired a very high-profile executive, and he thanked me. It's like, he's now in a much better job, you know, same money, different industry, and he's flourishing. He was getting crushed in the position he was in. Even though that's good, it's never easy, you know, to make people changes. And, you know, that's always been the hardest thing is telling people no, letting people go, because they're not just a machine. It's a human being with a life, with a family, with dreams, with aspirations, and you know, I want to make sure that they know that I've factored all of that in everything I do. And so, again, that's where the emotional part comes in. I take it personally. They know I take it personally. They know I genuinely care about them. So it makes it easier, but it's not easy.
Ron, thank you. Ron, thank you for all you do for the youth of Love It Wrestling. I really appreciate that. The gentleman over there that asked about wrestling, he should send his kids to Love It. It's the greatest thing that's going on at Love It right now. What I would like to ask you is your work-life balance. You know, you're very successful, you're still at Brinks, but what do you see the future for Ron going forward? And your wife is incredible, and how have you know, what's the secret sauce to that marriage? Because, you know, you were home for a year and they told you to get lost. So I just think...
Oh, the kids did. My
Right.
wife actually liked me around. So.
Right, but she must be incredible, and
She is.
so
Amazing.
I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
You know, right after that accident, and you know, I got my MBA and everything else, and you know, I was sort of like a communist. I made all these 5-year plans on where I wanted to be in 5 years, and you know, what type of things I would have to do, and experiences and positions I would need to, you know get to my goal. And about 2 5-year plans into it, I just decided to turn my life and my career over to God. And I have this 2x4 prayer, which basically says, God, I figure I'm like spinning around aimlessly in this world that's so big and complicated. I said, if I'm ever in a position where I'm facing the right way, hit me in the back with a 2x4. Okay, and so, I mean, that's what happened with Brinks. I said, you know, Ron didn't want to go back to be a CFO. We had plenty of money, and I can talk about contentment later. I mean, you do need to set an amount on anything. I said, okay, if I get this, I'm going to be content. When you get it, you need to be content. The problem we have is, you know, people are not content. But, you know, the situation with, you know, going to Brinks was the latest example, or even recall. It's like, you know, I didn't want to do those things. I just felt that, you know, after pushing back 2 and 3 times, and the door was there, and it's not about transforming a company. It's about being a leader that could also help develop people. And it's not just developing their career. It's, you know, one of my top guys right now is just going through a really tough divorce. And, you know, I said, look, you know, I'll fly out and be with you right now. I said, you got earnings and stuff. And yeah, you're more important. So it's not just about the company, it's about the people. And, you know, when I'm called, and when God calls you to do something, you can resist and fight, and see how that goes. Or you can step up and say, okay, I mean, I really don't want to do that. I mean, this commute is horrible, right? So, you know, my offices are in Richmond, Virginia, and Dallas, Texas, and so I don't show bias. I live in between, right? You know, but I feel like I'm where God wants me right now, but I don't know what He wants for tomorrow, and you know, just to be flexible in that area. And Melody's great. You know, she's put up with a lot in my career. In fact, you know, I've retired 4 times. I'm not good at it. I said, you know, the last time I said, look, you know, what do you want to do? I said, I've you know, had a great career. There's nothing else that I really want to achieve. I don't want to be a CEO. I don't want to be, you know, I'm very content. And she just looked at me and she said, first of all, I don't believe you. Second of all, she said, you know, go where God leads you. And you know, we're still a great team. I'm looking forward to being together more in the future. And again, feel like I'm right where God wants me right now. And I guess that's a pretty content place to be.
Real quick, when you were doing all the deals, all the acquisitions and everything, I'm sure sometimes you were pursuing the company, had plenty of time to look into their leadership team. Other times it was probably you had to make a snap judgment on them. So how did you do that? How did you size up those leaders quickly to set, figure out if you wanted to do business with them?
A lot of times the leadership is critical to a company. In fact, you're buying the leadership, and sometimes it's not. I just mentioned this big deal we did in February of 2020. It was really 19 transactions in 18 different countries, and 14 of those countries were new to Brinks. And there was a global pandemic. Not only could we not travel there, they couldn't travel out of the country. And so to try to size up a management team by Zoom, it's like, so in situations like that, you basically say, look, do we have enough resources in the company that if there's a disaster, if there's anything else, could we bring somebody in as an interim step until we found leadership? We had a couple situations where the top guy didn't come, wasn't invited, however you want to put it, and there was a lieutenant in the organization who was an operations guy who'd never led anything before. He did great. He just stepped in and he's leading it. So it's, part of it is if you know you need the leadership, you better know the leadership. But as I said before, leadership is something that you can transfer in to an organization. It's not the ideal situation, but it's nothing beats the eye-to-eye contact. And so thanks for being in person.
Ron, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the pandemic. If you think about the last 2 years and the travels, and the top lessons learned going forward for Brinks, what are some of the things y'all are going to do different as a company and as a leadership team?
Well, for 163 years, Brinks has participated in the least profitable, most highly capital-intensive part of the cash ecosystem, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And so what we worked on during the pandemic is adjacent services that have much higher profit margins and require much less capital. So truly transformational, we call it our strategy 2.0. The pandemic actually gave us more time to test these things and get the bugs out before going prime time. I still would not have chosen it, but the pandemic was great because all 4 of our children moved back to Atlanta, and we have 4 new quarantine babies, grandchildren, and so we had 6 grandkids under 3. The oldest just turned 4, so I can't say that anymore. But so that was the silver lining. But for Brinks, it was the opportunity to develop a new strategy that should really transform the industry.
Thank you, Ron. We appreciate it. Small token of our appreciation is a sculpture by Loretta Eby.
Oh, wow.
You can take that with you, and
Right.
we really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. Make sure you get your ticket validated on the way out. Thanks a lot. See you next time.